I present to you Flow Flex Cards. What Flow Flex Card is a Flow screen component that allows you to take any record collection and display each individual record into its own card within inside of a Flow screen. The component itself is made up of a few things. As we move through here, the very top here, this is just a label for this. This does support rich text or plain text. You can provide a label for your Flow Flex card component. As we move through into each individual card, they're basically made up of three different sections. The top section here, this is going to be your header. With inside of the header, we have it. It is the record name that's always displayed, and then you have an option to choose an icon to display with that record as well. And we'll see how that looks when we take a back end look of how we set up this component. You have fields and the field values listed on the left-hand side of each individual card. And then on the right-hand side of each card, you have an option to have a list of actions. This display options here can either be a menu like what we're showing right now, or those actions can be displayed as a list on the right-hand side of the card to save your user some clicks. What these actions are actually subflows that you run, and you'll choose through the custom property editor inside of the setup for this component. So for example, if I want to update this account, I can click that, and these subflows need to have a text variable labeled record ID, similar to a flow action on a record inside of the app builder inside of Flow. So this subflow that I'm running, just using the record detail Flow screen component that you can find on Artificial SF, and I can save. Any changes that I have will automatically save back to that record. Other options you have inside of FlexCard 2 is right now we see that I have this blue check mark here. That's because I click this card. You have three different options as far as what happens when you click a card that's not clickable. So that means nothing's going to happen when a user clicks the card. Right now I have single select enabled. So single select, what this does is it's gonna put a checkbox and highlight the card that's selected, and it's also going to store that record ID for that card into an output variable that I could use that record ID further downstream in my flow. So if I move through here right now, let's say I select S-Force here and I click next, we see my single value has that record ID for that card that I selected. There's also options for single select and auto navigate. So that means anytime that I select a card, it'll store that value and that output variable for the record ID, and then auto navigate my flow screen. So it'll either move on to the next flow or next screen or next action within the flow, or terminate the flow at that point. There's also options for multi-select. So that means I can select multiple cards and it'll store those values into those values for those record IDs into a text collection that I can use further downstream in my flow once again. So let's take a look at how all of this is set up. So if I come into Flow Builder here, all I'm doing is I'm getting accounts, storing those into a collection, and then in the next screen, I have my FlexCard Flow screen element here. Like I said, this does come with a custom property editor to allow for easy setup and maintenance by most admins. As we go through here, all we're doing is we're selecting the object for our record collection. Then we are going to select the fields. So I can add fields here. So maybe I want to choose account type, and I want to get rid of billing zip postal code. All I got to do is X out of that as well. And then I move through. Like I said, it's going to use a record collection that I'm getting in that very first step of my flow, which is get accounts. We also have our pre-selected record ID here. Pre-selected record ID, what this does is going to pre-select a record from within my collection if I want to store that pre-selected for my users. My card size here, allows you to choose the size of your cards. So maybe if I added a bunch of fields or I have a bunch of actions I want to display on those cards, and you make them a little bit bigger to take in those parameters, I can do that, or I can make it smaller if I need to put multiple cards onto a single screen. You can choose style attribute for your card headers. What this means is you can take standard HTML, put that into here, and I'll apply that to your card header. So maybe if you want to highlight your card header, as an example, you could do background color, just like you would for standard HTML class. Apply that here. Your component label, what we saw at the top, I'm using a text template to build my label, and so I can add in some rich text to my label. Maybe I want to really make this component pop off of my screen. I can also pick an icon. Like I said, any standard Salesforce icon here, or if I leave it null, it'll align my record name in each card all the way to the left of the screen. So we'll leave that blank so you can see what that looks like. We also have our display actions as a list or menu. Right now it's displaying them as a menu where we saw that actions button. I can also change this to a list. So when it is a list, it's just going to display each of those actions inside of the card in a list view. And then show which flow. The flow are your actions. So I can choose to show any active flow I have inside of my org. This is screen flow or even an action auto launch flow. So if a user clicks that flow will run in a modal window. And then are my cards clickable? So before we showed single select. So if I choose multi-select, we'll see what this looks like real quick. You can select multiple cards with inside of your flow. So if I click done here and I click save and I run, we're going to see that my cards look a little bit different because I made some changes inside of my custom property data there. So we see that the icon's been removed. I added a background color to my header there, so my record names now pop up a little bit more. And then we also see that the zip code has been removed and has been replaced by account type. Now if I click on each of these cards now as well, we see the cards that I got selected, all three have a check mark. So if I go ahead and click next with inside of my flow, I see that those have all been stored into a text collection here. Once again, I can take action with further downstream of my flow. One other action that you can take as well here is you can do a single select and auto navigate. So what that means is if I choose single select and auto navigate here and I click done, what's going to happen is when I click a card now is that it is going to auto advance my flow onto the next screen or complete my flow. So let's take a look at that real quick. So once again, we're going to take a look at that. If I click on any of these cards, what I should expect to happen is that my flow moves on to the next screen, and it's also going to store that selected card's record ID into a text variable. Once again, I can use further downstream in my flow or take action on further downstream in my flow. So I'm going to choose Dickinson PLC, and we see that my flow instantly moved on to the next screen and is storing that value, that record ID, into a value inside of my flow. So that's just a real quick overview. If you have any questions or feedback, or you'd like to see some enhancements to this, please comment on the post, and we'll do our best to get it into the workstream. Thanks.